Aaron.
Yeah.
Why didn't you say it the first time I said Aaron?
Because it's pronounced Aaron.
You done messed up, Aaron.
Aaron is right here, everyone. It's not me who done messed up this time. It is, of course, once again, Scientology. Welcome back for more SPTV. Ooh, let's get the screen centered here, where every day is a great day not to be in a cult. Let's see, is it centered? Is it crooked? I think we're okay. Guys, there's so many things on my list of subjects to do videos about that it can get a little overwhelming at times. But on a nice, quiet Monday morning, as I'm trying to convince myself it still is. In fact, it is Monday afternoon. Sometimes it's fun just to play around with some smaller Scientology items. Guys, small in the sense that we're not about to talk about something incredibly controversial here. But if you are still someone who lives within the Scientology bubble and you are still convincing yourself that you are not in a cult, the two things that we're going to discuss today really should make you think a little bit more deeply about that. I know thinking deeply isn't something that's encouraged when you're in cults, but every now and then someone in Scientology starts to realize, uh-oh, something's not quite right. So we have two items here. This is what we're talking about. The title of this video is, you know, Scientology is a cult when they do this. Now, this is when you have to propagandize your own members and lie to your own members about what it is that you as an organization are accomplishing in order to keep them believing, in order to keep them disconnecting from their family, in order to keep giving the group their money, turning over their children to the Sea Organization. You have to lie to your own members. Now, to me, this is a subject that's kind of near and dear to my heart, because in retrospect, the entire time that I was in Scientology, I never once expected that anything we were told in the international Scientology events was false. Now, in retrospect, that makes me feel very, very stupid. I'm just being honest with you. It really does. Because the stuff that gets said in Scientology's international events, which are events, they're only intended for members only. It's not, you're not allowed to, these are members only events. The stuff that we were told is so over the top and it is so hyperbolic that like only a moron would think it was like literally true. And yet I was one of those morons. And yet I know Scientologists aren't morons. That's kind of the point. Like, you know, Scientologists aren't dumb people. But when you're in these high control groups, the stuff that you can be convinced to believe makes you look dumb. In retrospect, usually, I guess to the rest of the world, all Scientologists kind of look dumb when they find out what Scientologists actually believe. So what the hell are we talking about, guys? Talking about two separate things. The first one we're going to start out with is The Way to Happiness, Scientology's little Way to Happiness booklet, and claims that David Miscavige made in their New Year's event just a few months ago, that Scientology single-handedly brought the protests and the rioting in Portland, Oregon to a grinding halt instantly just by passing out Way to Happiness books. I got some new inside skinny from a Scientology insider in Portland about what really happened in Portland. Needless to say, Scientology did not stop any protests or riots, but it gets a little sillier than that. Like, of course they didn't. Yes, of course they didn't, but it gets even sillier than that. Okay, so the first thing that I want to show you, just for the sake, you know, Scientology, don't say I never did anything for you. I'm going to promote the Way to Happiness booklet to more people in this one video than you have members in the entire world. Okay, so what is the Way to Happiness? It's this little tiny booklet. Even as a Scientologist, I always thought this booklet was a little silly. Even as a Scientologist, I knew we didn't take this booklet very seriously. It's really a booklet that's used to just shame children into how to behave better. For anyone who happens to wonder, well, what the hell's in this booklet? What is the Way to Happiness? I want to be happy, but I don't want to join Scientology. How can I be happy? Well, the L. Ron Hubbard says that if you follow these 21 steps, these are the way to happiness, guys. Get ready. Get ready for this. Take care of yourself. Be temperate. Don't be promiscuous. Love and help children. Honor and help your parents. Set a good example. Seek to live with the truth. Do not murder. Don't do anything illegal. Support a government designed and run for all the people. Don't harm a person of goodwill. Safeguard and improve your environment. Do not steal. Be worthy of trust. Fulfill your obligations. Be industrious. Be competent. Respect the religious beliefs of others. Try not to do things that others would not like, try not to do things to others that you would not like them to do to you. Try to treat others as you would want them to treat you. Flourish and prosper. Now, one of the ways I knew we didn't take that book very seriously is L. Ron Hubbard's own policies tend to contradict a good number of the items on that list. And, it's almost like that booklet is something that Scientology uses to wave around to the media and say, look at us, we're churchy. Don't we? Look, this book sounds kind of churchy. This is like L. Ron Hubbard's version of the 10 Commandments, except we got 11 better. Instead of 11 commandments or 10 commandments, we got 21 precepts, okay? You guys got 10, we got 21. You're old and busted, we're the new hotness. Okay, needless to say, if Scientology were able to reduce crime or whatever other bad activity by handing out their booklet, one might wonder why they haven't done it around their own Hollywood based on L. Ron Hubbard way. Why is that still such a dangerous place to be? Or around Hollywood Boulevard, where Scientology has a massive presence. Hollywood Boulevard, not exactly what you think of when you think of the way to happiness or whatever. Okay, so what did Scientology say? I am gonna take a look at this, guys. This is actually what David Miscavige said to all Scientologists in the world at the New Year's Eve event. And I won't read all of it. This is actually how David Miscavige talks when he gives speeches. This is actually how his speeches are written. All you have to do is keep that booklet flowing into society like gentle oil spread upon the raging sea. The calm will flow outward and outward. And here is a story of perfect demonstration of exactly that. Portland, Oregon. It is where underlying passion and prejudice tear away at decency and civility until the city erupts in anarchy and rage. Rioters storm downtown Portland for more than 100 consecutive nights, while a violent crime wave at the inner city breaks all local records. But standing right in the heart of downtown as a beacon of sanity is our ideal org. Launch point for Portland Operation Calm. Phase 1 begins with mobilizing teams to accomplish the first major target, namely saturate riot hotspots within a full mile radius of the org with the way to happiness. Given pandemic restrictions, limit face-to-face and door-to-door distribution. The org orchestrates a massive mailing, so even as the riots rage, the org was all hands on deck, with more than 100 staff and volunteers working to deliver a message urging Portland citizens to live together in peace. And I promise you guys, the following paragraph is the last one you will have to hear. Hour after hour, they assembled packages for every individual address, inclusive of a response card for additional booklets. All total, you're looking at more than 3 tons of materials to infuse a ravaged city with nearly 44,000 copies of The Way to Happiness, all in a single postal blitz. Yet it's what happens next that enters this story into the pages of Portland's legend and lore. Because call it magic, call it divine intervention. The very next day after booklets arrived in residents' hands, the nightly riots don't just let up. They stop cold. I promise you at that point, everybody had to stand up and give a 5-minute standing ovation to His Holiness, the tiny David Miscavige, because that's what you have to do pretty much every time he finishes a paragraph at one of those events. Those were David Miscavige's own words. That was 3 months ago. He literally said by distributing 44,000 copies. Okay, I'm going to have to put my phone on Do Not Disturb here. Okay, by handing out 44,000 copies of this booklet, the riots magically stopped. David Miscavige took credit for ending the riots by passing out the Way to Happiness booklets. Okay, so what really happened? Oh, I guess I have to open up Signal again because that's where my little thing is. Okay, so check this out, guys. Check this out. Okay, I'm going to give you the information, and then I'm going to tell you if I was a Scientologist. Oh, God, there's just so much I want to say about this. Okay, here's the information. I had to wait to reveal this information for a certain amount of time to pass, so the information couldn't be traced back to only certain people. Okay, so it says, you know how David Miscavige claimed at the New Year's event that the Portland riots were single-handedly stopped by handing out the Way to Happiness booklets? Well, the truth is, Scientology didn't even get those booklets printed up the way they normally would. They used the local printer. By the way, Scientology has an in-house printing center that can print these books up on demand for like a penny a book. Okay. By the way, you can buy them online for like $15 a book. That's how much profit Scientology bakes into its materials. Okay. So they used a local printer, and they didn't even begin printing up the Way to Happiness books until the day all of the riots ended. They did not even start handing out Way to Happiness books in downtown Portland until after the riots were officially over. The Scientologists in Portland claimed that it was just the act of merely printing up the books that stopped the riots. But David Miscavige gets on stage and delivers an address to all Scientologists in the world that it was this massive, coordinated, all-hands evolution of handing out 44,000 or mailing out 44,000 books that brought it to an end. And yet the Scientologists in Portland, they know that the story David Miscavige told on stage is not true. They all know it. Every Scientology staff member knows it. In Portland, every public Scientologist in Portland knows that that is an untrue story. So they convinced themselves that it was merely the act of printing the books. Guys, this is you know you're in a cult when. You know you're in a cult when. First of all, when your leader has to get up on stage and create a purely fictional story to serve as an example of how great you are, how powerful the technology is, how society is clamoring for all of Scientology's technology, clamoring for solutions, all Scientologists have to do is present the solutions on a silver platter because society's begging for these solutions. Guys, it's not very often that Scientologists have a perfectly clear example shoved right into their faces of David Miscavige bald-faced lying to the Scientologists. And usually when this happens, there's only a very small section of people who are even capable of knowing that the story is pure fiction. When I was still in Scientology in Philly, I remember this is a perfect example of David Miscavige. Philadelphia doesn't get a lot of love in the Scientology events or publications because it's a very small, tiny, failing organization. And even when I was there, it was doing pretty good, but relatively speaking, it's always been a small organization. And so there was an event, an international event. It was actually one of the anniversary Freewind's Main Voyage anniversary events. And David Miscavige, there was a whole section of the event, I say a whole section, a couple minutes, dedicated to acknowledging the people in Philadelphia who had managed to recruit a bunch of staff and organize enough funding to buy the new building. And what Miscavige said in that section of the event was completely false. And he basically pulled just some rich Scientologists who happened to be in the Philadelphia area, and in the event told this story that made them the heroes of the story. Just created this whole work of fiction of how the 2 or 3 rich Scientologists had single-handedly mobilized the entire field, which means all the public Scientologists around the Philadelphia area, and organized them and given them hats or jobs or responsibilities and trained them up and, created this whole little organization to accomplish all of these things. And all of the Philadelphia staff members knew that that was bullshit. And yet there's a bit, on the one hand, you're like, oh my God, he's just lying. How could you? And you never think it's Miscavige who's lying. You think people must have sent him up a bunch of false reports. It never occurs to you that it's possible that Miscavige is the one responsible for the lying. And this was something that even at the time, my mom, I was still on staff at the Philly org downtown at that time, and so was my mom. And it's one of these things where it didn't occur to my mom that David Miscavige was the one who was responsible for the lies. And so she wrote up this huge, massive knowledge report because my mom had a senior position at the org. She wrote up this huge, massive knowledge report on the people who she assumed had been submitting the false reports, when in reality, it turned out it wasn't those people who were responsible for the lies. It was the people at International Management, including David Miscavige, who basically do every event going, we need stories to tell. We don't care if they're true. We need stories to tell to make everyone feel good about all the time and money and family members they're sacrificing to this organization, that every event is just basically a work of fiction. So that's why the title of this video is, Scientology is a cult when they do this. It's just one example. Propagandizing your own members with pure fictional lies to keep them brainwashed, to control their behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions, that you guys are great, the organization is great, society is horrible and ravaged and desperate, and we're the good guys. Everyone else is either the bad guys or the victims of the bad guys, and it's our job to rescue all of them, and there's not enough of us, so you need to work harder, work longer, give us more of your family members, give us more of your money. That's how you know you're in a cult. Okay, There's another perfect example of, Scientology is a cult when they do this. The next thing I'm going to share with you is based on a blog post that Mike Rinder did a couple days ago. And for any of you former Scientologists and staff members and SEER members out there, this is really going to chap your ass. Okay. The new org board. I'm already triggered, you guys. Okay. So, as I've mentioned on this channel several times, much more than several times over the past year or two, David Miscavige for the last 4 years has been training brand new command teams for every Scientology org in the world. This is because David Miscavige decided nobody had ever properly understood an L. Ron Hubbard policy letter before. Nobody had ever read the policy letters in the right sequence before. And if you don't read them in the right sequence, you could never possibly understand what they're really supposed to mean. But David Miscavige understood what they meant. He was the only one. And he couldn't understand why no one else seemed to understand what L. Ron Hubbard policy was supposed to say. And one morning he woke up and he said, I just realized no one's ever read them in the right sequence before. So he basically canceled, he threw away, it was like against Scientology law to be in possession of the Scientology policy volumes for like the last many, many years. They weren't available for sale. They weren't available on the shelves. And Miscavige re-released a whole new set of policy volumes. By the way, you can probably have them for the low, low price of, I don't know, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. You're welcome. And because he was re-releasing the policy volumes, he had to train brand new command teams for every org, obviously, because how could a command team ever effectively manage a Scientology organization if they hadn't read Scientology's policies in the correct order before? All right. So that's sort of the context of what we're talking about here. The new org board. And an org board, guys, it's just an org chart. It's nothing special. It's an org chart. It shows you the departments. There's 3 or 4 departments in a division. There's about 3 divisions in every section of the org board. There's 3 sections of the org board. There's, and I'm paraphrasing, you've got your administrative, your operations, and your business development is essentially what it is. It's not rocket science. It's not, it's just an org chart. Okay. New org board. Okay, Mike says, I mentioned this earlier. David Miscavige is promoting that the golden age of administration includes a new org board. And now, of course, the sheeple are parroting him, announcing that a new class 5 organizing board. But if you read on, you will see it's not in fact new, but it's in fact very old. It's been restored to pure LRH. Real quick, guys, class 5 in Scientology just refers to the city level organization that delivers Scientology to people who pay for it. And it's staffed by Scientologists who are not members of the C organization. So they don't sign billion-year contracts. They sign 2.5-year contracts and 5-year contracts. And these class 5 organizations are owned, operated, and managed by the mother church of Scientology. There's other tiny organizations called missions, but those are privately owned. They're not owned, operated, and managed by the mother church. And there's not very many of them. So that's all class 5 means in this context, is like if you live in Philly, Austin, Chicago, if you live anywhere other than Clearwater and Los Angeles, and if the organization near you is open 7 days a week, it's a class 5 organization. All right. Okay, this is a Facebook post. I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. Ugh. Okay. FEBC. Okay. As many of you know, with our FEBC teams, FEBC just refers to the new command teams. As many of you know, with our FEBC teams return came a new class 5 org board that has been restored to pure LRH. We on staff are currently studying this org board and comparing it to the old org board. And let me tell you, the new one makes so much more sense. As with anything that L. Ron Hubbard did, it's just logical, simple, and powerful. Come and be a part of this epic evolution with us and become a master of L. Ron Hubbard's administrative technology. Join staff, contact myself or Allison today. Guys, this post is really the reason why I named the title of this video, You Know Scientology is a Cult When They Do This. Guys, I'm going to revisit this one sentence. This staff member is referring to the new Scientology org board, which is actually the old Scientology org board. It says this new org board makes so much more sense. Guys, here's how you know you're in a cult. Prior to David Miscavige re-releasing this old org board and saying this org board is the one that makes sense. Any Scientologist, public Scientologist staff member or Sea Org member, using the org board that has been in use in Scientology for the last 25, 30 years, if they had ever said that the org board did not make sense and that it was a mistake, that is something, if you continue doing that, you could get expelled from Scientology for. If anyone studying the org board said to the core supervisor, this org board doesn't make any sense, this org board is not logical, this org board is not simple, this org board is not powerful, you would be subjected to, I'm not going to say abuse, I'm going to say harassment. You're not allowed to say things like that in Scientology, because they say Scientology is 100% pure. Miscavige has been saying that since they took over in 1988. Scientology is 100% pure, and it works 100% of the time when applied 100% correctly. And if you don't understand it, or if something doesn't make sense to you, or if there's something seems contrary, or you can't think with it, it's because you have a misunderstood. There's something you don't understand about it, and the problem is you. You are not allowed to criticize the material. And you know you're in a cult when the leader is the only one allowed to say there's a problem. So David Miscavige will get up there on stage and he'll almost laugh when he makes announcements like this about how everyone has always known this for a long time. And the audience will laugh like, hi, yeah, we always knew that didn't make sense, but we weren't allowed to say it. You're not allowed to say that there's something wrong with the written material of Scientology. And yet David Miscavige is. Now look, only a Scientologist would care about the thing that I'm saying right now. And I promise you there's a lot of Scientologists who secretly really do care about this, but are afraid to say it because they know they're not allowed to say it. It's just like back in 1996, Serge and I, we did a video, was it yesterday or the day before, about, it was 2 days ago, about training children as professional Scientology auditors. And we showed you a video of a young 11-year-old girl engaging in professional auditor training. That video was shown at an event in 1996 called the Golden Age of Tech release event. The Golden Age of Tech is a perfect example of when David Miscavige got up on stage and basically said, auditor training has always been being done wrong. And L. Ron Hubbard back in the day ordered that every Scientology auditing process be turned into its own specialized drill. But that order was never complied with. And you go, didn't L. Ron Hubbard realize that order was never complied with? Like, it took you, David Miscavige, discovering it and then using that as a justification to completely reinvent how Scientology auditors are trained. That was an example where he got up on stage and he basically said, no one's ever been trained as an auditor correctly before. We're instituting a new system of training auditors, and only now will auditor training be done uniformly, perfectly around the world, and you'll finally be able to get results. Half the people in the audience were probably like, wow, this is amazing. David Miscavige is really changing things. And the other half of the people in the audience were like, are you fucking kidding me right now? If anyone other than David Miscavige said something like this, they would be instantly declared a suppressive person and expelled from Scientology permanently with no ability to ever come back. You're not allowed to denigrate anything L. Ron Hubbard said or did, ever. And David Miscavige manages to figure out how to do it in a way where it seems like he's not really denigrating L. Ron Hubbard. He's denigrating all of the evil suppressive people who were supposed to be working for L. Ron Hubbard and did such a horrible job that they overworked poor L. Ron Hubbard. And L. Ron Hubbard was so busy saving the world in so many other ways that he just didn't have the time to deal with all of the horrible and insidious non-compliance from the evil suppressive people that he'd been depending on. But David Miscavige had to come in and save the day. Now, again, when I say something like, you're not allowed to denigrate L. Ron Hubbard, and oh my God, David Miscavige is denigrating L. Ron Hubbard. Again, only a Scientologist would really care about this stuff. I don't care about this stuff. David Miscavige can denigrate L. Ron Hubbard all day long. Makes no difference to me. But I like to take the opportunity, because I know a lot of Scientologists watch these videos, watch the videos of other SPTV creators. I know Scientologists watch these videos. And I just wanted to highlight this as an example, guys. Look at this Facebook post. She says, this new org board, as with anything L. Ron Hubbard did, it's just logical. Guys, that means the old org board wasn't logical. It's just simple. Guys, that's saying the old org board wasn't simple. It's just powerful. That's saying the old org board wasn't powerful. Good luck saying that and not getting into some sort of serious ethics and justice problem. But David Miscavige can say it to the entire world, and everybody celebrates and rejoices. Okay, Mike Rinder goes on in this blog post to actually explain the ridiculousness that this new org board is actually the old org board. And so let's look at this. This is the new org board that's being referred to here is the FEBC org board. So FEBC stands for Flag Executive Briefing Course, and we don't have to define it. This is the FEBC org board from 1968. It was subsequently modified numerous times while L. Ron Hubbard was still running the organizations. And L. Ron Hubbard did not continue using the FEBC org board. What is so remarkable is that when David Miscavige released the new 100% on-source policy volumes back in 1991, it contained the 100% on-source org board in every volume. Guys, on-source means according to what L. Ron Hubbard said or wrote. So in other words, when David Miscavige released the most latest current, except for this month, versions of the policy volumes, he's the one who created the new org board and said, this is now the new best org board that's most in alignment with what L. Ron Hubbard wanted. Miscavige is always the one claiming to be the one making sure everything's great, but then he re-releases everything and blames all the mistakes on someone else. Guys, if you're in a cult, if you're in Scientology, you have to see, if only David Miscavige is the one who's allowed to admit that something is wrong or something doesn't make sense or something is illogical or something is contrary, you're in a cult, guys. Okay. Okay, so he goes, and then, I'm sorry, what is so remarkable is that when David Miscavige released the quote, new 100% on-source policy volumes back in 1991, it contained the quote 100% on source org board in every volume. And then when the new quote, this time it's 100% on source, policy volume 0 was released in 1999, it was even more on source here. David Miscavige's latest cure-all, the golden age of administration, is now going to solve all problems with his new old org board. Of course, as you can see below, there is now a blanket order for all staff to study this DREC, just like the basic books, just like the Key to Life course, just like the Life Orientation course, et cetera, et cetera. And no surprise, it's an avalanche of cognitions and wins about how this all now makes sense. Yes. Guys, when you're not allowed to admit that something doesn't make any sense, and only when David Miscavige admits it didn't make any sense is anyone else allowed to admit it never made any sense, you're in a gosh darn cult. Okay, now we don't have to read this post here, but guys, one thing I'm going to reach out to, I'm going to ask all you under the radar folks, or all you people who are connected to under the radar folks. The most important thing about this photograph to me is the background. It says Universe Corps. Now, the Universe Corps is something that was canceled a number of years ago. And the fact that this person is standing at a Scientology organization with a very new, very clean looking Universe Corps logo hanging on the wall has me asking some questions here. So let's see. So this is Melbourne staff, which means this isn't even a Sea Org. Let's see. Melbourne staff are smashing through their hatting with massive hours of study to get through the new hatting lineups. No, I mean, this could be a Sea Org. It's actually hard to tell. Just because she's a Melbourne staff member doesn't mean she's not studying at the Sydney Sea Org organization, the AOSH ANZO. Okay, so why am I talking about the Universe Corps? Okay, so guys, as you may know, Scientology staff members in their local org, their local city level organization, like Minnesota, Twin City, Minnesota, Detroit, Austin, Houston, whatever, Philly. Technically speaking, staff members there are supposed to be able to do Scientology auditing and go up the bridge. But those organizations are only allowed to deliver up to Scientology's state of clear. Because Scientology's confidential OT levels, where you learn about Xenu and the body thetans, those can only be delivered by Sea Org members, and Sea Org orgs are not Class 5 orgs, almost exclusively. And so it's hard for staff members, even if they had the money to do it, it's hard for staff members to do their OT levels. Well, L. Ron Hubbard had laid out a policy where once an organization reached a certain size, like 200 staff members, $100,000 of income a week, there's certain benchmarks, statistical benchmarks, that once the org reached those benchmarks, the Sea Org would send a team of Sea Org members to work at that org permanently, and their only job would be to audit staff members of those orgs up the confidential OT levels. This was supposed to be the carrot to encourage staff members to work as hard as possible to get their organizations up to that mythical size. In Scientology, they call that size Saint Hill size. They call it Saint Hill size because they say that's how big the organization in Saint Hill, England was when L. Ron Hubbard was personally running it in the mid to late 60s. What Scientologists don't know is even those statistics are mythical. No, those weren't the actual real statistics of Saint Hill. But David Miscavige says that it is, so everyone believes that it is. When an org achieves Saint Hill size, they're supposed to get to Universe Core. That Universe Core was canceled because there were no Saint Hill size orgs anymore. Every org that had become Saint Hill size had slumped and gone below the size of old Saint Hill. And so this staff member, who was supposed to be from Melbourne, is standing in front of the Universe Core. So guys, whoever knows what's currently happening with the Universe Core, hit me up at growingupinScientology@gmail.com. Because I'd be very interested to know more. All right, guys, let's see. We're going to jump through some comments here, and then we'll wrap this one up. Trailblazer Laura, welcome as a new member to the channel. Rogue Hedgie, welcome as a new member to the channel. All right, Unstable Datum. Sounds like he is still in comm with the immortal spiritual being called Dan Sherman. It does. I really wonder who's writing David Miscavige's speeches now. Jill Davidson gifted a channel membership. Thank you, Jill. That's awesome. Janice Halderman gifted 5 channel memberships. Thank you, Janice. That's incredible. KC Cat, little Captain Davy. He spews shite. He's a joke. Indeed. Laurie Plays. Laurie gifted 5 channel memberships. Oh my goodness, Laurie. Thank you very much. Jules Francis, welcome as a new channel member. Casey Cat, Saturday at L. Ron Hubbard's birthday party in Kansas City, every table had pads with sheets of printed checklists of new courses they should sign up for and books they should buy. Sadly, my insider got busted that day and escorted out. Wow. I would like to see if there's any screenshots or screen captures or any other way to see what those lists are. I'd be really interested in seeing that. Thank you, Casey Cat. Sir Crepitus gifted 5 channel memberships. My goodness, Sir Crepitus. Thank you so much. Ken's channel says, how do Scientologists, especially Sea Org members, see L. Ron Hubbard, Tom Cruise, even Sea Org members having multiple divorces justify tools of life courses obviously not working? It's a good question. If Scientologists claim that they have the tools to effectively handle all problems in life, how do they explain all these things like divorces and broken up families and people being declared suppressive persons? There's a number of ways to justify it. Using the Scientology language, you would just call it misunderstood words over its and evil purposes. L. Ron Hubbard basically says that simply going by a word you didn't understand in something that you read sets off a cascade of events that result in like a dwindling spiral of essentially you go by a word you don't understand, and then you sort of have this blankness, and then you sort of disassociate from the subject that you have a misunderstood word on, and then you commit harmful acts against that subject, and then you individuate and separate from the subject to keep yourself from doing harmful acts because you're basically good and you're trying to protect the group from the bad things that you're doing to it, but you're doing the bad things to it because there was something you didn't understand, but there's something you didn't understand because you went by a word you didn't understand. And because this cascade of events can all be, this disastrous cascade of events can all be set off by something as simple as going by a word you didn't understand, is why Scientologists are so obsessed with looking up words they don't understand in dictionaries. And it's not a bad habit to be in, to define words for yourself. It's a good way to learn things and expand your vocabulary and make sure you know what the hell you're reading and, reading or listening to. But it is a little obsessive in Scientology. And it is a very easy scapegoat for when someone has a downfall. Even if the downfall involved like committing crimes and getting into trouble, L. Ron Hubbard really does trace all that back to just going by a misunderstood word. And we're all susceptible to it. And, they say Scientology works 100% of the time when applied 100% correctly. But the key operative word there is applied 100% correctly. And I think a Scientologist would say, well, no one's fully capable of applying it 100% correctly 100% of the time. And then it just opens the door to this sort of unfalsifiable reason that you can give for why anything goes wrong. And also, the more important you are in Scientology, maybe the higher position that you have, the higher responsibility level you have, the more weight your overts have. An overt in Scientology is a harmful or destructive act. So if you're a super, super important Scientologist, or if you're somebody who works directly for David Miscavige, the tiniest little mistake could have disastrous consequences. And so it can be easy to cave yourself in and start down the dwindling spiral. There's all sorts of ridiculous explanations for why so many of Scientology's most prominent names, figures, and families have had their lives just completely destroyed. David Miscavige's family and life has been destroyed by Scientology. So has Tom Cruise's. So has almost every Scientology exec. So has almost every family in Scientology. You just chalk it up to things like this. And then there's an even more broad way to explain all this stuff away is, guys, we're unplugging people from the matrix. We don't have time to worry about things like divorce. Who gives a damn? We're literally unplugging people from the matrix. We are the only hope that all of humanity or civilization or existence even has in this sector of the Galactic Federation. We don't have time to worry about things like divorce. Who cares? Having a happy marriage or a long-term marriage is meaningless in the grand scheme of things if what we're really here for is to unplug all of humanity from the matrix and get the show on the road. We don't have time for things like being polite or being nice or going out for dinner on your anniversary, or, we don't have time for things like that. Following the law, please, what a waste of time. We don't have time for all that shit. That's what the WOGs deal with. That's what the non-Scientologists worry about. We're doing the Lord's work, or Xenu's work, or L. Ron Hubbard's work. We're unplugging humanity from the matrix. That's what really matters. Seeing your children, what a waste of time. You're off purpose, your other intention, you have other fish to fry. You want a day off? What's wrong with you? Tom Cruise doesn't even take days off. Tom Cruise wants to romp. If Tom can't romp, you can't romp, okay? I mean, I'm kind of going on a rant here, but like Scientologists don't even give any thought to something like this, Ken. But when they do, there's always someone to jump in and explain how it must have all come down to a misunderstood word. Thank you for the question, Ken. Okay, Julie Fire Rocks. Aaron, what is the difference between staff uniforms and Sea Org uniforms? Thank you. I've watched for years. Well, thank you, Jules. Look, there used to be a very obvious difference between Sea Org uniforms and staff uniforms. I am almost convinced that in these new organizations, the new buildings, I should say, from what I can see, there is no longer a difference between the uniforms. The Sea Org members have their rank on their lapel. They have a little lapel pin. The class 5 staff members who are not Sea Org members, they have a little Scientology cross on their lapel pin, because staff members don't have ranks. Only Sea Org members have ranks. I got to tell you, from the videos I've seen from all the protesters outside of the different organizations, I think the staff members and the Sea Org members have identical uniforms, at least when they're working in those organizations. I'm still trying to verify this. I'm still trying to watch enough footage from enough different organizations. But for you protesters out there, see if you can help me or try to focus on this with your footage. When you see a staff member, get a good look at their collars and ask them if they're Sea Org members. And see if they, because what I'm not sure is, would a Sea Org member ever just wear a Scientology pin instead of their rank? Do all the staff members wear a Scientology pin? You might just ask them, guys, are you a Sea Org member? If you see chevrons on their collar, they're a Sea Org member. If you see a bar, the bar will be indicative of an officer rank. A chevron or a bar, they're a Sea Org member. If it's just a Scientology cross pin, they shouldn't be a SEERG member. But I'd be curious, let's ask the staff members and see if we can find any exceptions to those rules. Okay. Lino, listened to about 25 minutes of Davey last night. Ugh, no. Yes, thank you to the viewer. There was a viewer who got a recording of the full L. Ron Hubbard birthday event, and that viewer sent a copy of the recording to me and Natalie and Alex, and I saw that it had been published yesterday, but I said, I'm going to publish this too. It's 2.5 hours of David Miscavige giving a speech. Guys, even if only to hear what a cult leader sounds like, what is it that Scientologists are subjected to when they go to these events? Listen to a portion of the video. It really is incredible. And as someone who used to sit through those events and love them and think they were great and saw nothing weird about the way David Miscavige spoke, listening to those things now, after having been out of Scientology for a good bit, it is so cringeworthy to think, or to just even try to fathom that the many of the members sitting there listening to that actually believe it. Whereas to anyone else listening to it, it's like it's obviously a con man up there. That's how con artists speak. It's like obvious. And yeah. Anyway, I recommend checking that out. It is hard to listen to. Doc, thank you very much. Ren B, I saw that Ashton Kutcher is on the possible subpoena list for the P. Diddy trafficking investigation. Bro needs new friends, or perhaps he too is just a bad person. Allegedly, of course. Yes, I feel like the time will come when I might have to do some Ashton Kutcher P. Diddy content. Yeah, I'm wondering if there's going to be a Scientology overlap component to that. But we'll see. We will see. All right, guys, that's all I'm going to do on this for right now. Stay tuned. So much more to come later today, later this week. So much more coming over the next 2 to 3 weeks, guys. A lot of really exciting, surprising stuff coming up. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you, as always, to everyone who watches until the very end. And I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe